Big Pharma. What is it good for? Well, not absolutely everything. It's good for some things, for sure. We know that. Over the last 100 years, Big Pharma has really just grown at almost an exponential rate, you might say. It's mushroomed into this mega, multi-billion, $100 billion, trillion dollar now industry that just keeps growing more and more and shaping our lives in ways that may not be for all the good for all of us. I see where the TV guy, Dr. Oz, is railing against Big Pharma. Of course, he's been affiliated with them and benefited a lot from them over the years, but now he's sort of like biting the hand that feeds him kind of thing, Davy and Goliath, and he's going up against them running for Congress in Pennsylvania. Very interesting story, but not to digress into that. I have experience with pharma. As many of you, I'm sure, no doubt, have had some pharma drugs in your life prescribed to you and taken them. And basically, the history of Big Pharma goes back really to the 1600s in Darmstadt, Germany, when Merck was founded as a company. And then in the 1800s, it really started getting off the ground as a business, growing bigger and bigger, and using the industrialization of drugs and promoting them and selling them. And then we see about 100 years ago, Big Pharma really started taking off when drugs like insulin were developed and created. And then penicillin, of course, also had a huge impact in the world. We know that antibiotics have been overprescribed to the extent now many of them are not working. And even though they have stronger and stronger antibiotics, the strains of bacteria are getting much stronger, and some of the antibiotics are just not that effective anymore for a lot of people. So that's a danger. They predict that in the coming decades, we may be seeing tens, if not hundreds of millions of people dying from infection in the past that antibiotics might have helped, that no longer are going to help. So there is a danger with overprescribing drugs. And let me just get into it a little bit and some of my personal experience with drugs. I didn't take a whole lot of pharmaceutical drugs until the early 1990s. And I was then diagnosed by a psychiatrist based on a little 20 question questionnaire that, oh, Mr. Patterson, we believe you have bipolar II syndrome, and we're going to start prescribing you some wonderful drugs like lithium, Klonopin, Wellbutrin, and all these other psychotropic drugs that are going to help your moods and help you stabilize. Well, in fact, they did seem to for a while, for the initial years I took them. Of course, I had many complications right away, too. The lithium caused my thyroid to be imbalanced. I had tremors, shaking all the time with my hands, and I had to take a thyroid medication on top of that. It affected my blood pressure, so I had to go on blood pressure medication. So a lot of medications, when you take them habitually, regularly, all the time, as prescribed, can have other effects on the body that cause an imbalance, and then you get prescribed more drugs. And I think there's a danger in that, because all the drugs that are prescribed through Big Pharma, they have what's called contraindications, side effects, basically, unwanted effects from the drug itself. And some of these can be horrendous. And I've experienced some that were really, really, really bad and couldn't take those drugs very long, had to get off them quickly because the side effects were so bad. And so I pay a lot more attention to those kind of things now when I take any medication that's prescribed to me. Currently, I take one small dose of lisinopril, which is for blood pressure stabilization, and I have not been able to successfully get off that completely. So I still do take that every day, but I take half the dose that I originally was on, so that at least is good. That's the only pharmaceutical drug, in fact, the only drug, period, that I use anymore. I've recently abstained and quit using cannabis, marijuana, that I had used for 43 years habitually. 33 years ago, I successfully quit using alcohol, that I had an addiction, alcoholic problem with that. I had other street drug addictions such as cocaine, and I dabbled a lot in psychedelics, which I haven't done for a couple of years now. But psychedelics tend not to be something you do habitually. It's pretty hard to do those every day. You fry your brain pretty quick if you try that. Amphetamine, I was prescribed by doctors. I used street speed that I had bought on the street, sometimes not crystal meth or anything like that, but just little capsules that people would have, black market, Benzedrine, that sort of thing. But just sparingly over the years. I was never heavily addicted to speed. But when I did start taking Adderall in 2008, I took that drug then for the next 8 years, every day, a 10 milligram dose twice a day. And I had to have it every day. I had to have it. If I skipped a dose or forgot a dose, sometimes I would forget the dose, I would start having a meltdown. My brain would have such brain fog I couldn't think or function. And that would always trigger me to realize, oh my God, I didn't take my Adderall. I got to get one so I can think again. So Adderall had a lot of really negative effects on my body, affected my heart in negative ways, affected my teeth in bad ways, dried my mouth out, caused my teeth to have issues. And it just basically, it's a neurotoxin that really ought not to be prescribed like that habitually every day. But psychiatrist said, hey, you have bipolar, you need to take these drugs. For 25 years, I took the drugs faithfully every day as I was prescribed, because I knew if I didn't take one of them, there would be serious consequences. And that is the danger in taking a lot of psychiatric drugs for whatever condition. Now, subsequently, I've been sort of re-diagnosed now by several different psychotherapists as potentially not having this severe bipolar syndrome that he had diagnosed me with. And in fact, I may have just a condition of the personality, which is more typically referred to as histrionic personality. So I do have this tendency a little bit toward emotional drama theatrics in my life, at times emotional things that will come a little bit out of proportion, a tendency to talk a lot excessively. And, you know, just I'm sort of a high energy person, what we might refer to as a hyper person sometimes. But honestly, a lot of that has calmed down over the years as I've cut down and reduced and discontinued the use of drugs, especially the psychiatric drugs. Since I got off the psychiatric drugs, I was able to get off the other ones like the thyroid medication, the Tagamet for acid reflux, and a number of other ones. And so it's been good for me to reduce from seven pharmaceutical drugs, I should say, every day, to just taking one small dose a day now for blood pressure stabilization. So I feel good about that. I don't even use caffeine anymore, or if I do, it's very, very rare and sparingly, just tiny, tiny amounts, and that's it. No more habitual use of coffee all day long as I used to do. I just want to say that pharma companies, they've become enormous. I believe that they were the ones that were promoting, possibly even behind all of this whole business that we experienced the last 2 years. I don't know. It's just a theory I have. It's a conspiracy theory type thing, that I believe Big Pharma was in a way promoting the whole thing and might have even had a role in what occurred, you know, this so-called virus that came out. I don't know. It's hard to say what role they played in it, and to blame anybody in particular, I couldn't say. But I'm very suspicious, because the old saying is follow the money. And who's profited the most from the pandemic? Who profited the most? Big Pharma. By far, Big Pharma has profited more than anyone, as far as I can tell. They have raked in enormous profits and will continue to do so with future ones that will come out. We will have more resurgences of more viruses. They're never going away. People that think the virus thing is going away, that's ludicrous. Viruses are part of life on Earth. They will never go away completely. And now it's like the Pandora's box, so the stuff's out there and it's going to continue to proliferate, I'm afraid, in the future as well. So kind of be prepared and ready for that. And the role that Big Pharma is going to play in it will be the rescuer. Oh, Big Pharma to the rescue. We've got the vaccine. Well, I have a lot of issues with that, and I've talked about it before, and I've had my videos blocked and taken down, and I've had a channel removed, and I've had other blockages on other social media, on Instagram and YouTube both. And so it's very distressing when I try to express what my experience has been, just my truthful experience, and that is not allowed. That is censored. I'm not allowed to talk about it. So I have to kind of tiptoe around in a way when I say anything about drugs or the drug industry, because they're a huge, huge business, and they have a lot of power over our lives today. And unfortunately, it's not all for our betterment anymore. This idea that because insulin and penicillin came about, and they, yeah, certainly great breakthroughs for humankind. It saved a lot of lives. But now it's gone too far the other way. Big Pharma is on steroids today. It's another drug. And they're basically out of control. The profits they make are so huge that they can spend upwards to $6 billion a year. That's a lot of money still, even today, $6 billion. Just advertising and marketing these things on television. Then they also spend upwards of over $20 billion a year advertising, promoting, and marketing to doctors, to medical doctors. This is where most MDs get their training nowadays. It's not from studying nutrition, holistic methods, other alternative, less benign and less damaging and harmful treatments that could be helpful to humankind. No, they're getting all their programming and information from Big Pharma, and Big Pharma has nothing more to promote than drugs. It's all about drugs. Big Pharma is not promoting a healthy lifestyle, anything that's would be actually beneficial to the human organism other than a chemical. And we know the chemicals are derived from oil. Most of them, they have toxins in them that the liver has to process and remove. Every one of the pharmaceutical drugs that are out there have that. So they have a negative effect on the body overall. That's something to be concerned about, I think. If you're taking one habitually, regularly, being prescribed one that your doctor's telling you you need, whether it's for cholesterol, blood pressure, or whatever it might be, I would be suspect of that kind of thing, and do your own investigation in terms of the contraindications, the side effects, as to what kind of long-term effects they could be having on you. I know some friends right now that are trying to get off some drugs they've been on for a long time, and they've been very debilitating. They reach a point where they really don't do you that much good anymore, and they really start working against you. The idea is that the human body has a magnificent ability to heal itself if we do the proper things that the body needs to heal. But that doesn't necessarily mean being on a pharmaceutical drug all the time is the best way to heal. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. I think you ought to use pharmaceutical drugs when you need to take them very, very carefully and cautiously and judiciously and sparingly. Get off them as soon as you're able to. Don't get locked into the idea that you need to be on a pharmaceutical drug for life. To me, that was a big mistake that I made. I'm glad I changed that. I got off the drugs 5 years ago. And the doctors were telling me at the time I had to take them the rest of my life. And I thought, no, I just can't buy that. I believe there has to be a better way. And so it was a very painful process to wean off those drugs. It took me 6 months of slowly tapering down to be able to get off those drugs. That's how potent and powerful they were. And the side effects and the withdrawal effects, I should say, were horrible, horrible withdrawal effects. I imagine they were, much, much worse than any of the withdrawal effects I had quitting alcohol or any other drugs that I was on. And I've heard horror stories of the DTs that people have getting off alcohol or heroin withdrawal. I can't imagine they come anywhere close to the withdrawal problems that people have and that I had getting off pharmaceutical drugs. So in closing, I just want to say, be mindful of your own health. That the best way to have good health is to promote with healthy lifestyle choices, good nutrition, some supplementation possibly with herbs, not more so than with actual pharma drugs. Exercise, meditation, basically just cultivating a spiritual life of some kind, and a life of gratitude and appreciation for your life, and reducing stress in any way you can. Because stress is something that will definitely shorten a person's life and affect our health. So that's my little spiel today on pharma drugs. I'll probably have other talks in the future, but I just wanted to get that off my chest today, because Big Pharma becoming more of a problem than a blessing to us that it maybe at one time was. Namaste.